Why has a country with one of the world's most advanced aviation and intelligence systems suddenly found itself facing an extremely difficult strategic dilemma? And how did Iran manage to create conditions where even the most sophisticated Western technologies no longer guarantee the expected results? Dear viewers, you are on the channel InfoVector. With you is Daniel Brooks, and today we will take a detailed look at why the events of spring 2026 began to reshape the balance of power across the Middle East. In early May, it had become increasingly clear that Tel Aviv's expectations of a rapid shift in the situation had not materialized. The initial assumption was that a series of precise operations against key facilities could pressure Tehran into negotiations on favorable terms. However, the reality that followed turned out to be very different. The first major challenge was the dispersion of infrastructure. Over the last several years, Iran significantly expanded its deep protection network. Many facilities previously considered critical either turned out to be secondary locations or received such extensive underground protection that even the latest Western technologies failed to produce the anticipated effect. Israeli aviation, carrying out large numbers of sorties, encountered a situation where the impact of these operations appeared temporary. Production chains continued functioning deep inside the country, while damaged facilities were restored much faster than many analysts had predicted. The second issue was connected not to technology but to internal resilience. Long-term mobilization, economic disruption, and constant tension gradually began affecting domestic stability. A partial slowdown in the technological sector, combined with the extended deployment of reservists outside civilian life, steadily increased public pressure on political leadership. Meanwhile, the Iranian system, shaped by decades of sanctions and economic restrictions, demonstrated a much higher level of adaptation to prolonged instability. That is why, by mid-April, many observers began describing the situation as a confrontation not simply against a military force, but against a combination of geography, time, and resource endurance. Logistics also became an increasingly difficult factor. Distances of roughly 1,500 kilometers required highly complex aerial refueling operations. After several weeks of sustained activity, the strain on support aircraft and flight crews noticeably intensified. At the same time, Iranian missile systems and unmanned platforms operating from mobile launch positions required far less complicated infrastructure. This was the stage where many Western analysts began speaking about a transition from technological superiority to a broader contest between resource sustainability and operational endurance. One of the most discussed episodes involved the Fordo facility. By mid-April, it became clear that reliance on specialized bunker-penetrating systems had not produced the expected outcome. The issue was not only the depth of the site, but also the design of the structure itself. According to multiple assessments, the facility was located beneath layers of mountainous terrain reaching depths of nearly 100 meters. Even the most advanced penetration systems showed limited effectiveness against this level of protection. Much of the energy generated by the operations simply dissipated within the rock formations. Another important factor involved the internal protection architecture. Reports suggested that critical equipment had been mounted on specialized shock-absorbing platforms designed to reduce vibration transfer. As a result, even powerful impacts failed to fully interrupt internal operations. In addition, Iranian engineers reportedly implemented a layered defensive design using empty cavities and specialized filling materials between reinforced sections. This further weakened the transfer of energy inside the structure. As a consequence, Israel found itself in a highly complicated situation. A significant portion of its strategic arsenal had already been utilized, yet several core objectives still remained unresolved. For many Western observers, this became a major signal that traditional methods no longer guarantee quick results against deeply fortified infrastructure. However, an even more unexpected factor emerged in the electronic domain. By mid-April, it became increasingly evident that aviation had entered a new operational environment where conventional air superiority no longer appeared absolute. Iranian electronic warfare systems began generating serious navigation disruptions. According to various reports, multiple incidents involving reduced targeting accuracy were recorded. Some precision-guided systems deviated from intended routes, while others demonstrated unstable performance. At the same time, reports emerged regarding the deployment of passive detection systems. Unlike traditional radar networks, these systems do not emit signals, but instead monitor changes in the surrounding electromagnetic environment. For such systems, aircraft shape and low observable coatings become far less important. Because of this, pilots increasingly encountered situations where their presence appeared detectable even in sectors previously considered relatively secure. Another major challenge involved the disruption of network-centered coordination. Modern aviation depends heavily on continuous data exchange between aircraft, satellites, and command systems. Yet, in several operational zones, serious communication limitations reportedly emerged, sharply reducing overall coordination efficiency. Against this backdrop, the situation near Israel's northern border also became more complicated. By mid-April, it was clear that the Hezbollah factor had evolved from a secondary concern into one of the key elements shaping pressure on Israel. Israel was forced to maintain substantial forces along the northern line. This required continuous deployment of heavy equipment, reservists, and additional security systems. Large-scale escalation never fully materialized, yet the constant expectation of it continued consuming significant resources. Meanwhile, the pattern of operations from Hezbollah also changed. Instead of irregular launches, greater emphasis was placed on unmanned systems and precision-oriented operations targeting infrastructure facilities. Energy nodes, logistics corridors, and communication systems became the primary focus. As a result, northern districts of Israel began facing growing interruptions to economic activity. Some enterprises temporarily reduced operations, while pressure on the national budget steadily increased. According to multiple estimates, the number of mobilized reservists approached roughly 250,000 people. The state was forced to allocate enormous monthly resources for their maintenance, while economic activity across several northern regions noticeably declined. One of the most concerning developments gradually became psychological exhaustion. Individuals remaining under prolonged mobilization increasingly questioned how long the crisis could continue and what its ultimate objectives were. If the northern direction became a major resource challenge, the financial situation began generating even deeper concern. By late April, many analysts openly described the economic burden as extremely severe. The core issue was cost asymmetry. The expense of advanced interception systems significantly exceeded the cost of the systems they were designed to counter. Each launch of defensive interceptors required enormous financial resources, while many of the systems used against them were considerably cheaper. During periods of large-scale activity, this imbalance caused expenses to rise at a rapid pace. Additional strain came from the mobilization of the technological sector. A substantial number of specialists became involved in reserve units or defense support structures. For an economy heavily dependent on high-technology industries, this represented a serious challenge. At the same time, international rating agencies began lowering their outlooks regarding Israel's financial stability. This complicated access to external financing and increased borrowing costs. Against this backdrop, the government reportedly discussed reducing parts of certain social programs in order to redirect resources towards security and infrastructure support. Domestic frustration linked to economic uncertainty also became more visible. At precisely this stage, the diplomatic landscape also began to shift. Washington increasingly viewed the situation not only through the lens of alliance commitments, but also through the broader impact on the global economy. Rising oil prices and concerns surrounding energy markets generated growing anxiety inside the United States. As a result, by late April, American diplomacy appeared increasingly focused on reducing tensions. Reports regarding indirect consultations through intermediaries began surfacing in various media outlets. Simultaneously, political debate inside the United States intensified over future military assistance and support for Israel. Questions that previously received little public attention increasingly became subjects of open political discussion. In Europe, the situation also became more complicated due to rising energy prices and growing domestic dissatisfaction. Altogether, these developments gradually increased international pressure on Tel Aviv. As a result, Israel found itself in an extremely difficult strategic position. On one side, military capabilities remained substantial. On the other, economic, diplomatic, and societal pressure continued intensifying. The central conclusion of spring 2026 is that the old rules governing regional confrontations are rapidly changing. Even the most advanced technologies no longer guarantee fast outcomes when the opposing side is capable of adapting to prolonged instability. The events of recent months revealed several major structural changes. First, deep fortification and advanced electronic warfare systems significantly reduced the effectiveness of traditional technological superiority. Second, economic resilience and the ability to endure prolonged pressure proved just as important as equipment and military capability. Third, it became increasingly obvious that even major allies now prioritize their own economic and political interests above all else. Today, Israel appears to be entering a period where many long-standing assumptions regarding national security strategy may need to be reconsidered. At the same time, the broader Middle East is gradually moving into an entirely new phase of regional confrontation, where the decisive factor is no longer the speed of operations, but the ability to withstand long-term strategic pressure. Do you think the region can eventually return to its previous balance, or have the events of spring 2026 permanently changed the rules of the game? This was Daniel Brooks. See you in the next Analytical Reviews.